All right. So we're just gonna get started. Welcome to the You're Canceled Social Media and Cancel Culture webinar. Uh, yeah, a little clapping. So us as the NASPA New Professionals and Graduate Students Knowledge Community, Region 3, kind of came up with the idea for this webinar, especially last summer when a lot of things were happening in regards to social media and the news. There was a lot of terms being thrown around, especially cancel culture, and we kind of wanted to digest that. And as you may know, as new student professional, as student affairs professionals, uh, we kind of have to evolve with the times, and social media is a big thing that's affecting students and honestly ourselves during this time period. So we thought it would be great to get a group of experts and sit down and talk about what culture social media is in this new age, and how us as new student affairs professionals or just student affairs professionals in general should kind of craft our art towards it. Let's begin with our moderators. Whitley, if you would want to begin.
Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So like Rayshawn shared, he and I will be your moderators for this evening. My name is Whitley Grant. I currently work at North Carolina State University, where I work in prevention services as the alcohol and other drug coordinator. I'm also a first-year doctoral student at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro.
And then, hello, my name is Rashawn McKenzie. I am a first-year graduate student at Clemson University. My graduate assistantship is in Unite's late night programming in the Center for Student Leadership and Engagement office. And as you see below, you kind of have our reach out information and also like our social media. So if you want to follow us after this, go ahead, kind of peep at our social media, because you know this is a webinar on social media.
Right.
And before we get started, let's do a couple of housekeeping things. Make sure you verify that your sound settings to make sure that you could hear us properly. I think right now would be a great time to do that. So if y'all want to just take a second, make sure that you could hear us loud and clearly. That would be great. The video, so only panelists and moderators are going to be shown on the screen. We are also recording this webinar. So if any of your colleagues or friends were unable to attend tonight, we do have a recording of this that you could just ask for, and we'll certainly give it out to you. And we also have a question and answer feature. So as you see, this Ring Central kind of looks very familiar. It looks kind of like Zoom, except it does have that question and answer feature. So we encourage y'all to ask any questions that you have. Just type it up and we will make sure that we try to get to that. And before we begin, let's start with our panelists. Pearson, if you would like to begin.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Pearson. I serve as the Assistant Director of Transition and Engagement at Florida State University. I'm also a doctoral student in our higher education program here at Florida State. And do you want me to answer the question, or do you want to circle back to that in a second?
You could answer the question.
Okay. And I use she, her pronouns, sorry. So for me, cancel culture can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. I think for some folks, cancel culture serves as kind of a self-preservation mechanism to protect themselves, while for others, it can be seen as kind of deconstructing or dismantling a person or a system that we no longer see as socially or morally acceptable. And then when we talk about like cancel culture, it's really about like rallying your constituents or your peers around that belief of being canceled. So it could be no longer supporting a particular cause or a person. It could definitely be accountability. There's some roots in power and value there when we talk about cancel culture. But I think the other thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned is that like cancel culture is not necessarily censorship or silencing. It really is rooted in values and opinions. And so the things that you might be sharing as facts or maybe your product can really be debunked debunked, or you as an expert can, or a leader in a particular field can be seen as untrustworthy or lacking value in that thing. And so that's what cancel culture kind of means to me. So excited to be here.
So as you all can see, we have Dr. Kevin Coakley listed as one of our panelists. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it because he lives down in Texas. And I'm sure you all have seen on the news and on social media about all the terrible things that are happening in Texas right now as far as the weather goes. But we did still want to leave him up here because he has a wealth of expertise in this subject and in the area, as you can see, of African American and African diaspora studies. So we did want to leave him up here. He had confirmed, but was unable to make it due to the weather. Agassi,
Okay.
do you want to go next?
Sorry. There you go. No, you're totally fine. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our digital universe for the next little while. My name is Agassi Rodriguez, and I use he, him pronouns. I am the Assistant Director for Student Leader Development at Clemson University, inside of our Center for Student Leadership and Engagement, where I get to work with Rashawn a little bit down the hall. Cancel culture to me, very similar to what Pearson was saying. I do think it is a mechanism in order to point out, or very clearly for communities to be able to say, this isn't all right, and we want to let people know that this isn't all right. At the core of what I think cancel culture is, it is community organizing. It is a way for folks to display publicly that something or someone does not fall within the values that they see fit, and that they are espousing that to other folks and to the public. I know that cancel culture can very quickly mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and is very readily at times weaponized by folks to mean, as Pearson was talking about, censorship and lack of First Amendment rights, and well, you're just trying to get rid of me because you think I'm too powerful of a political opponent, when in reality it is a mechanism by those who at times have been marginalized or are at the fringes of our society, to let folks who are in power know this isn't all right, and look how many people think that this isn't all right. And we can point to many examples of successful organizing around cancel culture, and a lot of hashtags, a lot of movements that have been centered around that. I know one great example is hashtag Free Britney, hashtag Free Britney, please. So just lots of things to chat about. Really excited to be here tonight with everybody. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole DiBartolo-Maye. I use she, her pronouns. And actually, most recently, I did a little bit of a life and professional transition. I currently serve as an academic advisor at Delgado Community College, resided in New Orleans, Louisiana. However, as of recently, I was colleagues with Pearson for about, 5.5 years at Florida State University, and working in student conduct. So the position that I previously left was I was an assistant director in the Department of Student Conduct and Community Standards. So basically, this kind of issue was a huge, among many things, but really came to surface over the summer. I think when I think about cancel culture, what it means, and look, I think big picture, it looks like accountability. And accountability for me is about doing better. When you know better, you do better. And I really see this not only for individuals, but institutions. And I will speak to that as someone in terms of what does accountability look like. But I think ultimately it's 2021. We need to come aboard. I think it's about doing it in a way that ultimately makes us better and promotes more equity. So that's all I'll say. Thank you all.
Hello, my name is Dominique Carter. I use she, her pronouns. I am a CARES coordinator at NC State in Prevention Services. I work alongside Whitley. I'm also a licensed clinical mental health counselor outside of that. And so from both points of view, be kind of looking at this from the effects that cancel culture may have on folks. For me, looking at the question of what cancel culture means, or it looks like to me, it, as everyone said, and as Pearson started off, it looks like a variety of things. The first thing that kind of comes to mind is that cancel culture is, very similar to that quote about rioting being the message or of the oppressed, but cancel culture is kind of taking that on in a sense. It is the voice of the folks who are now holding folks accountable in a way that is showing up kind of effectively in some stances, whether it's positive or negative. It is that voice, and it is very helpful, especially when, you know, it might not be safe to protest, even though folks are still doing protesting in person, but to do it on the platforms that you have. And cancel culture can, you know, operate in a way to come against or go against those who say things that are, as others said, against what the moral grain or, you know, what we hold to be the ideal for integrity. But also it can be weaponized. And one of the examples I think of when I think of it being weaponized in a negative way is how Colin Kaepernick was canceled. And that is, to me, the best example of a positive person moving to do good things was had cancel culture work against him in a way that still to this day kind of affects him, but at the same time, he is out there doing the daggone thing. I mean, Ben and Jerry's is holding him up well, which I appreciate. So it's Nike. So it's coming back around for him. But yeah, that's what I think of when I think of cancel culture.
Thank you all. So on this next slide, we have taken the questions that we have received from our audience members who signed up ahead of time, and we broke it down into 3 objectives that we'll be covering this evening. So they are dissecting cancel culture and the negative and positive effects of it, how social media affects the students and the way they view the world, and lastly, differentiating between cancel culture and accountability culture. So this is going to be our objectives that are the overarching themes for tonight, and our questions will fall up under each one of these.
And so to begin, dissecting cancel culture and its effects. But before, we did have a question in the chat about how to contact for recordings in case like your internet shut off. You could email me or Whitley or whatever link you got towards here, and we'll figure it out and we'll get it out to you ASAP. And so let's begin. What is the harm of cancel culture? I think Dominique has some things to say on this.
Yes, thank you. So when we think about the harm of cancel culture, and we have to think about the harm of it, as most of the panelists who kind of introduced themselves discussed, there is good to cancel culture, but there's also this other side of it that can be harmful. And so when I think of the harm, I'm thinking more of the personal effects that it has on folks. The very first thing that comes to mind for me, and it's related to some of the work that I do, and it kind of goes into question 2, is the effect it has on folks' mental health. And this shows up in a number of ways, because when you have folks who are, you know, espousing or expressing these views or opinions or beliefs that they've held so strongly for so long, and some of these things are rooted in their upbringing or their environment or how they were socialized, and they don't know any other way, which at the same time we're like, how do you not know any better? It kind of puts them into this space or this tailspin of now they're questioning who they are. They're questioning who the people are who raised them, the people who, you know, they grew up around, the environments, the schooling, just everything that they knew to be true. And it pushes them into this place of self-reflection that for some can be difficult, especially if they're doing it alone. And if they're, you know, if they're not, then they're having to work through it in a very public way, especially if they've done something on social media, such as posting a statement of their own or posting something in support of someone else, and folks getting wind of it and it kind of hitting the fan for them. And so mental health wise, it can cause folks to experience depression. It can increase anxiety. It can also exacerbate kind of current mental health concerns that they might be having. It can also affect their standing in the environment that they're in. When I think about higher education, if you have someone who is within an organization or a department or a program and things come out, because they do, and I've witnessed this quite a few times, it can affect how someone does academically. And again, we think about kind of, they should have thought about that beforehand, and I believe as we go along, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, this idea of when do we cross the line from holding someone accountable into this toxic way of almost tearing folks down that will then have an everlasting negative effect on them. Because what our hopes are that they'll grow and that they'll learn, and that from this, they can become better people. However, it can have the exact opposite effect, because we know that sometimes these things can radicalize folks in a way that is not helpful and can be very dangerous. Would you like for me to go into question 2 as well? Okay, and so I talked about it a little bit in answering question 1 about how does cancel culture impact the work that I do. And so for me, as a CARES coordinator, I get referrals along with the rest of our CARES team for students who are experiencing distress, and that distress can show up in a number of ways. But something that we've seen a lot within about the last year or two are referrals that are coming through for folks who have essentially been canceled. And the major issue that we're seeing is that when they get to us, it has escalated to this level that even for someone who believes that cancer culture has its place in the world, as I do, it has now crossed that line into something that could potentially be dangerous or unsafe. It's when folks are being told to, when they're being judged about what they say and then they're being told to kill themselves. That's an issue. Or when they're being judged about what they say and saying, having threats made against them. That's an issue. And so that's how we're kind of seeing it show up, because folks are being referred to us once, we get wind of something that has happened, and now they're getting these threats online, or they're being told to kill themselves, or they're being told, their character and who they are as a person is being attacked in a way that goes, beyond what almost feels appropriate or necessary to hold them accountable. And so we have folks who work with students, depending on what the situation is, to kind of help support them through it and talk them through like what this means, what this looks like, the supports that are available for them, what their options are, and what they're interested in doing moving forward. And so, a lot of institutions over the last 6 or 7 months have seen students who have chosen not to come to an institution because they've said something online, they've been canceled, they got back to that institution. And now, while public institutions cannot revoke someone's admission, we've definitely heard of places saying, what the climate is like here now that people know what you've said or done, do you still feel like it's safe for you to attend? And so we saw a lot of that during the summer, and a lot of that going into the fall semester. And kind of that's how it's showing up for us, like working with these students through this traumatic experience for them, because it is traumatic for them to have people attack them in that way, but also working that balance of holding them, making sure that they understand what accountability is and how they need to continue to be accountable for their actions.
Thank you, Dominique. So for the next question, where does accountability stop and cancel culture begin? Pearson, would you like to take that one?
Sure, I would love to. So on just huge props to Dominique. I think you made some really fantastic points in terms of this conversation. I think when we talk about, where things stop and end on the internet, do they ever really stop and end on the internet? Because the internet never forgets, like, right? Like it's always there, it's always out there. And I think that those are things that we are trying to help our students and our professionals understand, is that, you know, it's always going to be out there, and you're leaving your footprint there. But I think something that I think about when I think of this question is, when did we start calling it cancel culture, and who started calling it cancel culture, who's getting, you know, canceled. And so we talk about students that have had, you know, really conservative beliefs that are maybe not supported, but there are also a ton of Black and brown student activists who are sharing their stories of trying to make impactful change on their campus, that have really had some harmful experiences on social media. And maybe they're not using the term canceled culture, but there are a group of people out there that are not agreeing with them, and how have they been responded to in a way. And so I think about going back to my undergraduate experience at the University of Mississippi, and being one of those loud voices that wanted to progress our institution, and had some really terrible things said to me, and absolutely needed to do the counseling and the therapy and the things to make sure that I was taking care of myself. And so really asking the question of, like, are you being canceled, or are you being held accountable? And I think that oftentimes, if you do not have a marginalized identity, or if you've never experienced accountability, it can feel a little bit like being canceled. But we are responsible as educators to help you understand the consequences of maybe some of your opinions, and how you're feeling. And so really just making sure that we're stepping in and leaning into that conversation. But I think when I start thinking about, like, accountability and cancel culture, and where do all of these things kind of have their boundaries, for me, cancel culture can have a sense of capital, right? So it can make change, it can make policy changes, and it can also, cancel culture can also have consequences, and it can be kind of a de-authentication, or invalidate what you are saying, not you as a person, but what you're saying as a fact is not, right? And people are going to bring in, and they're going to fact check you, and they're going to have those things. But I do think, to Dominic's point, the line is when cancel culture starts to incite harm and violence and threats, then it's bullying. Then you're not doing the accountability piece that can be the good part of cancel culture. And so really being cognizant of where those lines are. You can absolutely fact check someone without saying you're an idiot, right? Like you can give them an APA reference in a tweet, and move on about your business, and not having to do that where it becomes like really harmful. And so I think one of the other like final things that I'll say on like that line of accountability and cancel culture is that I think some of the harm that gets created is this lack of ability to evolve, right? That if you do say something that is harmful, or you do say something that you didn't know was wrong, you hadn't been introduced to that particular thing, sometimes it can feel like you can't evolve. And I'm a person that believes that people have the capacity to evolve, but sometimes cancel culture doesn't always leave room for that evolution. But I also think at the same time, when you have created harm, and it's not the responsibility of the harmed person to forgive you and to offer all of these condolences and pat you on the back. And so really trying to be hold yourself responsible. Like if you did say something, and if you did maybe not know something, know that you do have the capacity to evolve. You do have the capacity to change and grow and evolve in what you're doing, and wanting to make sure that when we talk about accountability and cancel culture, that we're leaving room for humans to evolve, which is one of the best parts of being human, right? Is that we do have the capacity to evolve. And I think Nicole was gonna share something.
Thank you, Pearson. So I really love how you brought up about the growth piece. So I think coming from my lens, I think the biggest thing that we have to think about when we're thinking about accountability is, what do we really mean by accountability? And I think we really have to define what that means based on the situation, based on the context we're in. So my former role working within student conduct, you know, I believe one of my colleagues brought up about the First Amendment. So I think thinking about what does accountability look like. So over the summer, I can't tell you our office, how many reports we received, this social media post, this TikTok, you need to remove them from your institution. You need to cancel their application. You know, and however I may feel individually, what is your institutional stance and processes? And I will say, I think what I've discovered and what's really hard for some of our students in our community to understand, in terms of some type of administrative accountability, what you can do and what you think you can do are two different things. And I think you really have to consider, I think this world of accountability or cancel culture, like we throw out this whole First Amendment right. And I think depending on the institution you're at, that can play a big role. And so, however, I think where, you know, as someone coming from a lens of student conduct and was a member of the Association of Student Conduct for many years, I think an area that institutions and individuals really need to explore is restorative justice. So us as an institution, you know, this happened to this one student. Okay, we can't think them through the conduct process, but we still, I think, have to do better on what is an appropriate type of resolution matter. And I'll say that's something I think I walked away with, like, and really, you know, and also like what is realistic accountability? And within accountability can there be growth? From an incident. And I think institutions beyond our like at least administrative student conduct processes, while depending on the institution you're at, we are bound by law and everything like that. But, you know, I distinctly remember a conversation with a student having a follow-up with like a student who literally point blank asked me a question when I was in student conduct, said, so I was called the F word and you're telling me that is not, someone can't get in trouble at Florida State for that. And I remember being like, this student has a point. And it's a really difficult question to answer. And okay, so, you know, and I think we need to, as institutions, think about better ways that we can address this. But I also think it's helping with our students in our community to be about what accountability do they want? Is it activism? Is it a conduct process? Or what are some of those limitations? But I think the accountability also doesn't need to be bad. There's real opportunities for growth. And criticism, I think we automatically, like criticism of our institutions, it doesn't have to be, it can be opportunities for us to re-examine our processes and be better.
And with that, we're going to go on to our second objective, which is how social media affects students and the way they view the world. What aspects of social media should be considered in the hiring process, if any at all? Pearson, if you want to speak on that.
Sure. So many layers, right? I think originally when I first saw this, I was like, we just shouldn't consider it. Just don't look at it. But I do understand that it's not as black and white as I wish that it was. And so I think as student affairs professionals, both who are hiring students, but also are going through application processes ourselves, is asking ourselves, like, well, why are we interested? What is it that we think that we are going to learn about this applicant from their social media presence? And are we asking their permission to look at that? Are we letting the applicant make a decision about their boundaries and about what they choose to share? And again, kind of going back to why do we want to look at it? If we're having them, you know, submit resumes and they got LinkedIn accounts and they've got, you know, accounts at whatever hiring thing that you're using for your career center at your institution, what is social media adding to that process? And I think a lot of times when folks are looking at social media, they're not looking at it from an additive perspective. You're usually looking at it because you're looking for something to not hire that student for the most part, or to not hire that applicant. And I can go back to, well, why would you want to do that? And then I think as I sat on this question today, I also, something that I think student affairs professionals sometimes don't like to hear is, well, what's the HR policy? Does HR say that you are allowed to consider that as a part of their hiring materials? We don't talk a lot about about what HR says that we can and can't do, because we know that some of our practices are inequitable, and we don't want to own sometimes those inequities and those processes. And so I think you really got to consider, like, what is it that you want to know? I can remember being in class, and we were talking about a student affairs professional who was later terminated from their pretty high ranking position because of some things that they said about America that weren't lies, right? Like, America has a really troubling past for Black and brown folks. And I definitely didn't see, from my perspective as a Black woman, nothing that they said was untrue. But there were some conservative individuals on that campus that felt like that was really out of line. And we opened up the conversation, and I said, well, if that's the case, I'm gonna get fired left and right, because I am absolutely gonna call out white supremacy, and I'm absolutely gonna call out whiteness, and I'm absolutely gonna say that this person is just a flat out bigot. And one of my classmates looks at me and she goes, no, sis, you just may never ever get hired. Like, they might just look at it from, and I'm like, but if those are my values and those are things that I consider my value, maybe I'm not the right candidate for you if calling out whiteness and white supremacy on my social media is going to make me seem like an applicant that you don't want on your campus, or a student that you don't want as a part of your organization. That is your right, I suppose. But I think we really need to start looking at why we are choosing to police people on social media. And for me, especially as a Black woman, there are so many other things about me that get policed, from my hair to what I'm wearing to my relationships with Black students. And it's like, well, you're just adding consistently to the list. And as the world evolves, you're just finding more ways to police Black and brown folks. And I think when you look at social media and you're looking at it from that negative perspective, and really interfering on that boundary, why are we choosing to create more ways for things to be inequitable for our students and our staff members that we're hiring? So I think if you can find yourself feeling me on that, maybe we just shouldn't look at it and leave folks with the boundaries that they choose to set. Now, if someone adds it to their resume at the top of their thing, like, go ahead, look at it. If they put their Twitter handle out there, sure. But if they're not putting it out there, maybe that's not something you need to go look for.
Thank you. Agassi, do you have anything you want to add?
Absolutely. Pearson, how do I follow up with Pearson, honestly? But to retweet so much of what she absolutely just said, and like, just so much, yes. If an applicant is not putting their social media on a resume, I'm not going to go looking for it. I try to be very respectful, and as Pearson was talking about boundaries around social media. For me personally, even in our office, we have a lot of graduate students at work, and I very much directly tell them, I'm not going to add you on anything on social media because I want to respect your space. This is your space, especially if it's a private account. Like, I'm not going to go knocking on your door. I'm like, hey, like, you want to be friends on social? Absolutely. I'm a great time. Let's connect on social. My Twitter's open. You can find me there all the time. Like, let's hang. But I respect your space. I don't want to encroach on your space. And that's with graduate students. And I feel the same way about undergraduate students. With the undergraduate students, as Pearson was kind of talking about, I very much think that the way that we approach social media conversations with students is from this lens of danger and harm and scary, don't do it, or you're not going to get a job kind of list. And I do think that there's so much room and so much space to have such a great conversation with students on, this is how you can use your social media positively. This is how you can add to your complete image on your social media in this digital world, which, as Pearson was mentioning, doesn't kind of end and is an extension of our physical world. What happens in a digital world and on the internet is not fake, is not false, is not virtual. It is real. The things that you say online are real things. Like, they don't just like, you're not just like a character in a game and you're just like talking into the world. You are actually talking to real life people. So for me, again, like, I respect the privacy of students. I'm not going to go looking for it. But as Pearson mentioned, if they put that on their resume and I go on there and there's just like a lot of things, and I'm like, okay, girl, like, you gotta, okay, like, come on. And what I mean by that about a lot of things is, again, we really have to interrogate, like, what is inappropriate? If a student is over 21 and they post a picture on their Instagram and they're at a brewery having a drink, I'm not going to be like, whoa, student affairs mode, that's a bad thing. You know, students, alcohol, no. Like, obviously, if they're posting, you know, 3 a.m. pictures at a rager on their Instagram page, on their Instagram account, well, that's a whole different story for sure. And that's like a conversation on like, girl, are you okay? Like, are you drinking water? Like, do you have a ride home? Like, are you safe? Because again, like, I think the way that sometimes we talk about students, and specifically around social media, is that we infantilize them. We put them in this position where we think they can't handle, like, you know, engaging in these spaces, when, like, especially the generation that we're working with right now has grown up with digital, like everything, with social media. They know how to use some of these platforms better than we do. Like, I mean, all these things that are popping up right now. So, you know, for me, I just think, again, I try to be mindful of, like, that is a space for you. I'm not going to encroach on that. But if that is something you're inviting me to look at, especially in like an interview setting, absolutely, like, I'm going to go check it out and look through. I'm like, oh, wow, look, she has cats. Look at these cats. Like, look at all these wonderful things. Look at how she stands up for these things that she said in the interview she stands up for. Again, that's alignment. That is values alignment. That is an absolute yes for me. But again, I'm not going to encroach on people's space if that is not something that they're inviting me into.
So someone also put as a question in the chat about do we see them as differently, and do we approach them the same way, I guess, for staff members? And I am right along the same page of, like, even for my graduate assistants or people that I'm working with, if you don't invite me into your social space, like, I'm not coming into it. I'm not going to ask to be a part of it. But I do think that some of those same things that we just talked about, that we use as kind of our measuring stick for students, should be used for staff members. Of like, I am good and grown, and I have absolutely had people that are like, oh my goodness, I would not post a margarita on the, I am almost 30. Are you kidding me? If I'm going to post my one margarita. And honestly, if you say something to me about it, I'm probably going to set a boundary right then and there, and I'm going to block you. And I'm going to remove your access to me, because you don't get 24-hour access to me as your employee. And so I'm absolutely going to set a boundary for you. Now, I do think that, like, if I'm maybe distributing or some things that you are worried about me, and I am, you know, I want you to check in. But if I am posting my one margarita and you're like, ooh, no, Pearson, we are probably going to have a boundaries conversation and talk about what your level of access looks like to me as a professional. And if I'm being perfectly honest and candid, I have blocked professionals of, like, I don't want you policing my behavior in this way, or wondering why I did not show up to this thing that you are not paying me to be at, that you said was optional. And now you're like, well, you tweeted this one thing. And I'm like, yeah, but this was optional anyway. Like, why are we doing this policing game of our staff members as well, and keeping those things into consideration? So again, I do think that, you know, my social media is open and it is there, and for the most part, if you want to know my values, you can scroll through my Twitter feed and you will find out what those are. And if those don't align with you, then okay, maybe we need to find a place where they align a little bit better.
Can I just, like, jump in really quick with that, because you definitely brought something up for me, and I'm thinking, like, going off of what you just said, all of my social media is private. Like, I've been working in student affairs since a long time. I will not tell y'all how old I am, but all I will say is I joined Facebook when Facebook started. Okay. And so since then, it's always been that this is a private thing. And I've worked, and part of the work I've done has been with student athletes, both in, you know, secondary as well as in higher education. And they want to be your friends, because you build these bonds with them and they all want to be your friends. And I'm like, no, private. Like, everything is private. You can't get up in my business unless I let you. And it's almost impossible for you to find me unless we have some kind of connection. So I definitely encourage folks to do that, because if you don't want people in your business, make it private. If you be careful about who you allow in as well, because I'm very selective with the friend button. And I will also unfriend somebody or prevent them from following me very quickly, as Pearson said. The other thing that you brought up for me, and Pearson, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I saw it yesterday, was the pharmacy student at University of Tennessee, who there was the article that came out regarding a post that she did, and kind of, I guess, her classmates coming for her, attempting to cancel her, because she had posted an image of herself, and there was like cleavage showing, and it was a quote from WAP, and it was this idea of, why can't I post something like this, like your margarita post? Why can't I post something like this? There's nothing here that reflects on who I am as a future pharmacist. There's nothing here that reflects on who I am as a student. There's nothing here that reflects negatively on who I am as a person. It kind of brought up some, the whole over-sexualization of Black and brown bodies to begin with. But this idea that classmates and other folks within that institution were coming for this person because she posted a picture with a lyric from a song that she liked.
No, I think you bring up some really great points, and I think what I would add is to pretend like we are in a place that is accepting of freeness, right? Like would just not be what's true, right? And so, like, to pretend that we're in a place that doesn't hypersexualize people or doesn't want people to fit into these particular standards would just be a falsehood, because we know that we don't exist in that world. And so I can tell you now, I wouldn't post something like that because I know that I don't exist. I wish I existed in that world, because I think Meg Thee Stallion is the bomb, and she's got some hits. Like, and when I'm in my car by myself, we're jamming. But like, I know where society places Black women. I know where student affairs places Black women, and I choose to live within the reality of that. I really wish we didn't have to, but we do. And I hate that we do, and I wish that we get to a place where we don't have to. And I hope that I, as a student affairs professional, can be a part of that, right? And so that's why I don't, my students will post a picture of they were absolutely at a bar and they absolutely look fantastic, and I absolutely saw it and went on about my business of whatever else I was looking at, because I can choose to do my very, very small part and just not perpetuating what I know is already out there.
Thank you for bringing up that very real example, Dominique. I was teaching on Monday, and they brought up that same example. So thank you for sharing that, and Pearson for giving feedback on that as well. So for our next question, how do you maintain the balance of self-preservation and accountability when interacting with others on social media? Agassi, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think when it's down to trying to find the balance between self-preservation and accountability, sometimes you really just need to check in with yourself and say, how much can I actually handle? And how much of this can I actually change? There are so many conversations that happen on social media that I see that come across my timeline. And you know what? I get paid sometimes for a 9 to 5. I'm not about to go after my 5 o'clock to try to educate others on social media and lose my sleep because y'all want to act a fool up on social media right now. And I am totally here for constructive conversations. I am here for education. I very much believe that conversations and like stories and like just little moments can help, really push people in the right direction. But there are just sometimes when I see conversation, I'm like, it's not worth it right now. And you have to determine what is that line for you. With my family, I will absolutely go in there with my family. And sometimes, unfortunately, to my own detriment of like, no, we're gonna have this conversation. We're gonna talk about these things on social media. On other places, sometimes, again, you really have to think about the fact that like you have your own mental health to take care of. You yourself are not going to be able to change the minds of everybody you encounter on social media. And you also have the power to craft, in a lot of ways, what it is that you do see on your social. And I say that, and I want to be very clear that I do not mean, you know, intentionally creating echo chambers for ourselves, because that is really easy to do in social media, to create a timeline where you see people that have the same exact thoughts as you, the same exact beliefs as you, the same values as you. And then you may have like one or two posts here and there where things might not align in that exact way. But again, you really have to check in with yourself and say, okay, do I have the energy to like engage in a conversation about this right now? I know for me, sometimes the way that my anxiety works, I cannot do this thing where I do a post and I wait 20, 30 minutes for someone else to do a post and then they respond and then I have to wait for their response again. I just can't do that. I'd much rather be like, hey, you want to talk offline? Like, you want to have a quick like I am conversation, and I'm happy to talk to you about this. It's okay to move a conversation off of social media. It is okay to tell folks, hey, do you want to like chat about this quickly, and not be in this like endless battle on like the comment section of a post. If you ever want to see some of the most interesting thoughts in humanity, go to the comment section of a recipe page. Because wow, do people have some strong opinions about recipes. And we all know that sometimes you'd be looking at the recipes and they have like an entire 14 pages about summers in New York and their moms and all. I'm like, girl, I'm just here for this lasagna, honestly. But go to the comment section. And again, you have to make meaning making. You have to think about it yourself. And I want to also be very clear, that is not me saying to never engage. Because I do think at a certain point, if we believe the things that we are saying, you do have to, in some ways, be really okay with the idea of like, I'm going to be in like a conversation that's not going to be the best probably, but who knows, maybe it is. But again, you just have to check with other people. Is this one of those things where you just kind of have to vent for a second? Because trust me, if I look at my photos on my iPhone, I have a ton of screenshots of just conversations where I'll just send it to somebody and be like, I need you to just look at this. What do you think? Okay, we're in agreement. Okay, this is wild. This is wild. Okay, and we're good, and that's it. But again, you have to check in with yourself. If you are looking at things and you're like, I have had a long day, I'm not in a good place, I just don't feel like I can talk about this right now, especially for folks who are repeatedly having conversations like this and educating and espousing so much and expending so much emotional labor to do all these things and have conversations at work about all these things and actually get paid sometimes to do these or not get paid to do these things. Again, you have to check in, you have to know what your limits are, and you have to sometimes realize, you know, maybe I just need a block, honestly. I know Dominique was just talking about that good old block button. If there's someone who is on your page and does nothing but harass and bully and just like say really nasty things that are not disagreements, they're just like, you know, like jabs. Oh, no. You have removed, if this is a situation where you're like both kind of follow each other, there's a term called the soft block that you can institute where you block them, you unblock them, and then they don't follow you anymore, but you're not blocked. Again, you need to use the tools at your disposal on social media. People are not worth your lack of sleep, especially right now where everything is everywhere. Like, you need to preserve your peace where possible, and you need to choose your battles effectively. Like, sometimes I see things online like, you know what? I'm going to take these ideas and I'm going to make sure that I incorporate this into the work that I do to serve students. Because again, that is where I feel like I can make an impact, not in the comment section of the Facebook page, especially not on those recipe pages, as I just mentioned.
And with that, let's get to our last part, our last objective, differentiating between cancel culture and accountability culture. So what alternatives do you suggest that might allow us to respond in such a way that encourages growth over judgment? Agassi, do you also want to continue and chat on this one?
I would love to. So, you know, and I'll be pretty quick about this specifically. I think when it comes to finding ways that encourage growth, especially with students, you have to really encourage them to reflect and to think about what they're doing. And if that is like you take a walk outside with them, you're like, tell me about your perspective. Like, tell me where you think about these thoughts, and help them navigate like that reflection process. That's what you have to do. But like, really, honestly, every day we make conscious decisions about who we want to be and why we want to be it. We make decisions, our actions speak towards what it is that we want to be and who we want to be. So I know when I've had difficult conversations with students, I'm like, who do you want to be? Like, what do you want to be known for? Like, you want to be a nice person, like you want to be someone who understands, is empathetic to like things that are happening in the world, well, this is an instance in which someone is saying that like you did harm. So how are you going to respond to that? Are you going to be defensive? Are you going to put the attention on you? Are you going to censor yourself in this situation? Or are you going to think, you know, maybe I did do something and I need to figure out how I can make it better? Because again, and I know Nicole kind of talked about this, like these opportunities for growth or these like stunted moments of growth. Like at the end of the day, our roles as student affairs professionals or working in higher ed, at least the way I see it, is that we are trying to educate and improve the students that we work with, you know, and sometimes that means that you have those not so great conversations when you are at a low, or they are at a lower point when something bad did happen potentially. But it is about helping them process that information and get them to a place where they can say, you know what, next time I'm going to do better, because that's all you can do at that point. You apologize, you say, you know what, I messed up and you got to do better the next time. But really it's encouraging them to reflect and to sit with it, because again, we cannot expect those who are marginalized or those who have been harmed to console the ones who've caused the harm, because that is just an emotional manipulation at that point. That's a whole other kind of thing. But again, we just need to be respectful of the fact that some folks are just kind of tired and some folks are not going to take things anymore the way they used to, or the way that society has made them take things in the past. So we just need to do better. And again, that's just an opportunity there for growth.
Thank you for sharing that. And our last question before we open up the Q&A portion, what recommendations do you have to more effectively hold students accountable for inappropriate behavior and bring awareness? Kirsten, would you like to take this one?
Absolutely. Thank you. I think something that really sits with me on this, and I can't remember who brought it up before, but just asking the question, like, what is inappropriate? Define it for them. Define it for us. Like, it should not be this thing that we can't, we shouldn't be sitting here still saying, like, we don't know what is considered inappropriate or appropriate. Social media has been around as long as our students, our current students on our campus have been alive. How do we still not have a policy for what's appropriate, what our expectations are? How are we still having the conversation of like, if the student over 21 should post a drink or should they not post a drink? We have got to do a better job as student affairs professionals with really outlining what are our expectations, what are our policies, what are the things that you are going to be held accountable for. And once we outline those, our student will have a backbone in some sense to be able to say, this is why you can't do this, and this is why this is inappropriate. And so one of my connections on here is Rashawn, being a former orientation leader. And what I used to tell those students is, you are an orientation leader for all the students that are coming through our institution. So if you get online and you say, I hate all insert whatever people, you are now not able to uphold the expectation that I need you to be and that our institution needs you to be as a leader. And so being able to clearly articulate that to them, but also to say to Rashawn and the rest of his teammates, if you're over the age of 21 and you post a picture of alcohol, okay, great. Set an example for responsible drinking and make sure that people know that they should do that responsibly. And I think that that's really going to help us become a more liberated society and help us make some of those decisions of who we are going to be and how are we going to best represent ourselves, best represent our institution, and really going back to like, what is our purpose here? What is our purpose for students? What is our students' purpose for being on social media? And then what is our purpose for outlining policies and practices and procedures for that? Making sure that we have something more than we just want to police you for the sake of policing you. No, I don't want you to post, I hate all insert whatever people, because I now then can't put you as a leader for a small group, for a group of students, because there's bound to be someone in that group that identifies with that identity that you just spewed all over Twitter that you hate. And so really being very clear with what are our policies, what are our expectations. This is not a new thing, and we as student affairs professionals need to stop acting like it's a new thing.
All right, thank you panelists for answering those questions. So now we'll open for any questions from the audience. You can just pop it in the chat.
Don't be shy, we're ready. Ready and waiting.
If possible, while we're waiting on questions, I'd like to make an additional comment, kind of a follow-up to what Pearson shared, if that's possible, while we're waiting for some people.
You can go ahead.
Sure. You know, I've known Pearson personally and professionally for a while, so I definitely agree with everything that you said. But I also think what I really, as someone who, you know, no longer works in the profession of student conduct, I think when we talk about policies and procedures, I don't really ever see a scenario where I see this concept of due process and I see these concepts of the First Amendment ever really going away. And the law is always in constant push and pull of what higher education is going through. And so I think really like what's going on in the world is what is happening across our campuses. And so I think even our practices, I think have to do better jobs about how to help our students manage conflict. Like I will tell you, like around cancel culture and some serious issues, but I mean, sometimes that we would get my former role issues, I'm just like, talk to each other, you know, or like, I think what is the expectation about the institution intervening on some issues? But I do think I think that's where I think we'll see an expansion of a lot of restorative justices practices, because we'll have our policy, we'll have a code, but like, I think we can't do nothing, right? So what is the in-between in practices? I think that in some formalized way, I think institutions can do better. And I think sometimes I was reading a little bit about, I believe Stephanie wanted that talked about someone who had an employee that they couldn't fire, but now they have to like, and that's a really navigating challenge. So legally, I can't really remove them, but I still have them on the team. And like, how do I navigate this space? And I think sometimes when you get into those spaces in the formal world where attorneys are involved and you're constantly worried about being sued and you have to toe a line, but like, how do you still continue to like have a conversation with an individual, be like, okay, you said this and you're still part of this team. How are you going to repair the harm with your team? I think we as professionals and as institutions have to do better at creating, I don't know if processes or the restorative, that's kind of the word that goes around, but we need to do better about formalizing some of those spaces for all of our students across campuses. Can't just like throw our hands and be like, oh, free speech. I'm like, yeah, but like we still, I mean, I still think there's a better way as institutions we could be addressing them.
Thank you so much for sharing, Nicole.
You're welcome.
If no one else has any questions, panelists, if you want to just like maybe leave the group with a little something. Again, here's our social media. This is me and Whitley. We also have Ainsley. I know we didn't really get a chance to introduce her, but she was also like our chat monitor. Oh, we have a question in the group. What's the difference between cancel culture and accountability culture? Does anyone want to take over that one?
I think for me, the reality is it's going to be different for everybody. But to me, cancel culture is a part of accountability, is that you can be canceled and that can be a way in which to hold some folks accountable. But accountability culture doesn't always have to be canceled culture. And I recognize that I just talked in a circle, and that makes it really, really complicated. But I think that these things are really, really complicated.
Yeah, like I said, best way to reach us, here's our little information right here. We also have, again, the information of our wonderful panelists for tonight. If anyone else has anything else they want to just kind of left over, any residuals right now, say your piece. Panelists. Oh, yep, there we go.
I just wanted to just say really quickly, can we give a big virtual digital round of applause to our moderators for our evening today for putting this all together? Hello, thank you all so much for bringing us together to have this conversation. We appreciate y'all, and we appreciate you all bringing this conversation to NASPA Region 3. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything left to say? Oh.
So I just wanted to end on, I want to see folks continuing to fight the good fight. Don't be deterred from speaking out against injustice and oppression, because folks need to be spoken out against. What I will say, as I said earlier, be careful about towing that line, because there is that fine line from your message being something that's powerful and strong and a voice of the people, to being toxic and harmful and dangerous. And so you can give somebody the work, give them the business, but don't go telling people to harm themselves, and don't go threatening folks, because then you lose people. You even lose the people who were supporting you. So let's be careful, but let's go out there and cause some trouble, because you can ask Whitley, I love to cause trouble.
Good trouble. Good trouble.
Good
Yeah,
trouble.
I think on that same line, just don't be afraid of it. I think so many people hear cancel culture and they're afraid of it. And I can say personally, some folks have canceled me, and I'm real proud of it, because my values aren't aligning with your values, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. And so sometimes when we do get canceled, it's because that person is having a reckoning with some values.
I've been canceled too, by the way.
Me
But
too.
Everyone, please raise your hand if you've been canceled.
If you've been, I think that might be a match of partner a little bit.
I'm almost like, damn, I haven't been. When can I? Like now I'm like, damn, I want to join the group. This might be it. We'll see.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, panelists. Again, if you want to see a recording of this, just let us know and we will get that to you right away. Make sure you follow up with our panelists. There are they have all their information right here, including their email addresses. So if you have any follow-up questions to anything they've said, make sure to send them to that. I'm pretty sure that they're willing to discuss this more. And as I said, keep fighting the good fight. Bye, all.
Yes, thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening.